Right, welcome back to the program. Ajuri Ngelale, the special advisor to the President of Media and Publicity, is here with me live in the studio. Welcome, Ajuri, and thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
I know it's a difficult time right now. This time is such
Busy season.
very busy season. But let's start from the President's Indian trip, and let's break that down. What
Sure.
I've actually also done on this show is that we've tried to break down that in terms of graphics. So our team can actually put that on air, but I want to really know the nitty gritty because it's one thing for us to get investment promises.
Sure.
We were also in the last administration. We had investment promises. The last president was in UAE also and all of that. Within the context of all of that, what is making this president's trip to India different from what perhaps we had seen in the past? Does President Tinubu really mean business this time?
No, it's a great question. So for us, it's important to note that yes, under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, we did have MOUs and certain investment pledges that did not work out, but we also had some that did work out. But I think the big difference here now with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is that this is the first president in recent memory who has been a full-time businessman. He understands business, he understands the language of business, and he speaks the language of business to investors. He knows as a subnational administrator in our federal structure what the encumbrances can be for business operators at the state and local levels, and now as president understands it at the federal level as well. So when he goes into the room to sit down with an investor, he's able to say, look, okay, you want to come into this sector within this location. What are your challenges? They can tell him their challenges because they're on the ground already. They've done their preliminary diagnosis, and then he's able to say, okay, on the basis of what you're saying, I will link you with Minister of Defense. I'll link you with Minister of Trade. I will link you with Minister of Finance. Whoever it is that needs to solve that problem, he's ready to solve that problem for them. So what he did was he held the CEO roundtable during which he brought 20 CEOs from across several Indian multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, then brought about 20 Nigerian captains of industry, CEOs of major companies, people like Sertoni Elumelu and others, to be at the same table. The point was to create a handshake. So you don't have a business relationship that is parasitic, one that takes away from Nigerian operators, but rather one that works in complementarity with Nigerian operators. So the president held the CEO roundtable where he was able to secure many of these pledges. But then after the roundtable, I was very privileged to be in the room when they came to one of the suites in the hotel where he was holding these meetings, one-on-one with each investor. And they would tell him that, Your Excellency, this area is a problem for us. This area is a problem for us. We need your intervention here. We need your intervention there. And he, one by one, line by line, he would say, okay, on this one we'll do this, on this one we'll do this, on this one we'll do this. Perhaps in the past, under the leadership of previous presidents, they may not have known because of their lack of experience in business, their lack of experience at the subnational level, they may not have been familiar with how to solve the problems that business operators brought to them. So perhaps they will say, instead of taking them line by line through the issues and through the resolutions, perhaps they would say, okay, go and talk to this person, and expect that that person will just solve all the problems. But this president is saying, no, for this, you're going to see this person. For this, you're going to see this person. Then he will bring the minister into the room. They were in the room as well. And he would bring them and say, look, this is what I need you to do. Make sure that this is on my table in the next 10 days. But more importantly, this is just kind of inside information that you wouldn't get in the news. More importantly, he told each of the investors across the sectors, whether it was power, defense, and many of the others that you saw, he told them that for all of them, he wanted to see them in Abuja with their full delegations within 30 days, each of them. He gave them a timeline.
Because I was coming to that there is one thing to speak, is another thing to have timelines.
Exactly.
What kind of timelines did the president give to those investors? And what quick wins? Are there quick wins that we can get from the $14 billion investment promise?
Absolutely. So some of the quick wins are that if you look, for example, at the $1.6 billion solar power generation project that has to do with 20 100 megawatt power solar power plant generation stations across I believe it's all the states of northern Nigeria, but all the plants are in northern Nigeria. When you look at that, that company, Skipper Seal Power Company Limited, had already done its due diligence with the northern states and the northern governors forum. So it's already been done. The question was about one or two specific presidential interventions that were required, which I cannot say on this program, but essentially that to unlock the actual money coming out. So there are several quick wins that just required a regulatory certification here, or one issue there, one encumbrance being moved here, or one bottleneck being crushed there, and all of that the president has done. But he told all of them, within 30 days, I want to see your full delegations in country, and I'm going to have all the various CEOs of the relevant agencies, Standards Organization of Nigeria, NPA, Customs, whoever it is that needs to be at the table based on your concern, they're going to be at the table in Abuja, in my office, and we're going to finalize, get your signature on that piece of paper, and you're going to bring that money in, and we're going to create those jobs for Nigerians. The goal here is not to do charity or to just say, oh, I have investment coming in. The goal here is very direct and it's very clear, just as it was when he was governor of Lagos, which is that when you bring in these industries, these facilities, these factories, not only are you creating the direct jobs for those who will be employed at the factories, and these jobs are for Nigerians, not for foreigners, then on top of that, you have the indirect jobs that are being created by the vendors and the MSMEs that are supplying the input parts or products that the large industry is now feeding off of to actually produce the larger value additive good that they're providing. Then the third leg, obviously, is the tax revenue generation. The tax revolution in Lagos was not an accident. It was on the basis of his ability to actively court new investors with new investments on the ground. So he's saying, this is what we have to do nationally. Now, with presidential powers and presidential resources, he's able to move things out of the way that he wouldn't have been able to do as just a governor. So he knows what to do with the power he has. He has a vision on which he's executing, and we believe that Nigerians are all going to be better off for it.
Is there a way, is there a role for states to play in all of this? Because there are also new investments that the president got in terms of investment promises. What role are state governors and state governments going to play? Because those investments are going to come into states, especially new investments.
Yes.
There are some investments that are already on ground, so some of those investors pledged additional investment. But for new investment, what role will governors play in all of this?
Very, very important question, because, and that's why earlier I referenced the experience of His Excellency Mr. President as a subnational administrator, as governor of Lagos for 8 years. It was that he knows exactly what the concerns of business people are at the state level.
Because, for example, the land will be on
absolutely
in charge of state. The land is in charge of
and again,
states are in charge of land.
100%. And you have all of the $14 billion investment we're talking about. I don't believe any of it is in Abuja, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
Almost all of it is in the States. So it just goes to your point. And for us, this is why when he was saying, look, when you come back, you're coming back to my office, we're going to have everybody at the table. That includes the state governors where these projects are going to be cited. So they're definitely going to be part of the process. The other aspect of this that I think went maybe a little bit underappreciated in the larger coverage of of the G20 visit was, on the one hand, the president met before the G20 with all of these investors, one-on-one and at the round table. But then on the other hand, when he had his opportunities to meet with the foreign heads of state at the actual summit itself, he had one clear focus. His focus was on the same economic development diplomacy. It was on saying, look, I'll give you an example. Again, I had the privilege of being in the room when he had these conversations. He was telling the German chancellor, for example, that we had Volkswagen in the country. We had this institution, that institution in the country. We want them to come back, and we're going to do whatever is required to make sure that they come back, and that 100% of their processes from raw materials, all the way to the production of those cars, that they're able to do it within the country with Nigerian raw materials, Nigerian inputs, and Nigerian labor for Nigerian jobs and Nigerian tax revenue. So these are the conversations he's having with the heads of state. Why that's important is based on those conversations that were economically focused, investment focused, the German chancellor agreed with Mr. President to visit Abuja in October. That's next month, to do a follow-up. But when he comes, the expectation is that he's coming with a delegation, CEO of Volkswagen and several other heavy hitters, that will now be at the table with our regulatory authorities, our relevant state officials, to make sure that we finalize on those things. But that's just Germany, not to talk of the other heads of state.
How about the issue of the value chain, the investment in the value chain of the different sectors? Because I'm actually also concerned about not just talking about getting investment, but how can Nigerians really be part of it? Not the days that we built refineries, for example, and our refineries have, we'll have to go and look for those that built it.
Exactly.
A transfer of knowledge. For example, you're talking about Volkswagen. Will they, I'm just giving that example in terms of harnessing the complete value chain with Nigerians at the center of it.
And you know who's going to be at the center of this is actually the Honorable Minister of Science, Innovation and Technology, Chief Uche Naji, because under him you have Naseni. And Naseni, the president just appointed a 32 years old, young innovator with several experiences, Mr. Khalil, who is going to be in charge of ensuring that our local capacity is rapidly developed with respect to research and development, with respect to innovation, because these are the institutions that are going to ensure that our manpower is fully developed to take advantage of the opportunities that Mr. President is working feverishly to bring into the country. So to your point, already, I believe it was, I don't want to say the wrong number here, but under President Muhammadu Buhari, he put in place presidential executive order. It was either 5 or 7 or 3. I can't remember which one it was. But it had to do with local content,
yes.
But with specific respect for science, research, development, and engineering and technology. So to ensure that basically any company that comes into the country we put a strict quota on them in terms of the amount of labor at the low level, mid level, and even the executive level of their companies that can be foreign as against those that can be indigenous. So we're looking at about, I believe the stipulation was about 75 to 80% indigenous across the board. So we're going to ensure that there's technology transfer. I can tell you authoritatively, as someone who was in those meetings, that when the president was discussing with German Chancellor, when he was discussing with the South Korean president, he kept emphasizing on the issue of technology transfer. In fact, one of the interesting things was one of the major investments he secured in India was in agreement with the Indian government on a $1 billion deal in the first phase, which will see to the resuscitation and rejuvenation of the Defense Industries Corporation of Nigeria, DICON, a company that in the 1970s, essentially it was manufacturing and supplying, I believe, 100% of all of our light arms, our small arms. It had gone into disrepair over the course of the last 40 years, the usual Nigerian story, but we're bringing it back. So under this arrangement, with the Indian government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, what he had successfully done in the last 10 years that he's been Prime Minister is that they had the same model for national defense that we have had for a long time now, which is basically import dependent.
So are you talking of the Invest India framework?
Oh, no, that's separate too. That one is separate.
Because
we can get to that.
Yes, they have Invest India. They also have, I think, Make in India.
Yes. So that's even a separate one. So this one is what they did was they were importing all their fighter jets, armored personnel carriers, you name it, from Brazil, US, Europe, etc. What they did now over the last 10 years is aggressively fund research and development locally and basically empower their local innovators and defense companies to fill in those gaps. And now they've basically become 100% self-reliant in most of the areas, ships, Air Force, everything. So what we've done is we're taking a similar tack. So our agreement with them is essentially to move DICON to 40% self-sufficiency in terms of what it's producing, in terms of armored personnel carriers, in terms of fighter jets, in terms of small arms, in terms of even protective equipment, all of it through our partnership with India over the course of the next 5 years. That's the program that the president is signing off on. Separately, he's working with an Indian defense technology company to establish an entire ecosystem in Nigeria. So instead of going to the US to get 10 fighter jets, for example, like we did in the past, or 12 fighter jets in the case of the Tucano, which was important at the time, what we're doing differently now is we're saying it's not enough for you to just give us the plane. and to give our pilot the training to fly that plane. That's okay and fine. But the next level is to build the entire ecosystem within the country.
That's why I asked that question earlier.
Yes.
In terms of the value chain.
Absolutely. To replenish all of the spare parts for that plane within the country using Nigerian raw materials and Nigerian labor and Nigerian small industries and large industries. That's the ecosystem that he's now working to build in collaboration with the Indians. And again, I've said this, $14 billion in just India. What is the possibility now? When Mr. President, after Onga now, when he's in a position to now be going to all of the countries, go to the US, go to all of the European countries, go to the Middle Eastern countries, go to Asia, really go one by one by one. What is he going to be able to achieve? I think Nigerians have a lot to be excited about.
Okay. You want to shed a little bit of light around Invest India that I talked about?
Oh, yes, sure.
Invest India, and you know, the Indians, they have what it's called Make in India. I think, yes, the Make in India
Absolutely.
Drive.
They don't play with that.
Yes, they don't. So what came out of that? That's one, because I'm looking at our time.
Sure.
Number two, did the president meet with Nigerians in India? Because there are many Nigerians also in India.
He did.
So what were the deliberations there? Are Nigerians safe? Are they secure in India? What kind of businesses are they doing in India? The third question, I want to jam all of them together so that you answer all.
Sure.
The third question is, India has so much advantage. Majority of, at least the tech companies in the US, many of them have Indian CEOs, from Alphabet to Microsoft to IBM. A whole lot of them are of Indian origin. What kind of knowledge, what kind of experience did you and your colleagues, as well as even Mr. President that went there, what were the lessons you learned from India in terms of our own budding technology ecosystem? Because Nigeria is still growing. At least Nigeria is perhaps, if not number one, number two in Africa in terms of even startup funds, the funding that are coming for the tech sector. Number 4 question, I hope you're taking them, but I know you're smart, so you can do that. Number 4 question is the businessmen that followed Mr. President, the likes of Tony Lumelu, Abdul Samad, Rabiu, and was Dangote part of the team?
He wasn't able to make it because of another engagement.
But you know what I'm talking about, those businessmen, what were they also able to get from their counterparts in India in terms of perhaps collaborations, or even in terms of Nigerian businesses also going to set up in India? Because we shouldn't just be excited that India is coming to Nigeria. What are we also setting up there? So
fantastic.
God help you.
Thank you very much. So essentially, first of all, let's start with the diaspora. Yes, the president met with the Nigerian community in India. They did express concerns, not so much around security, interestingly. I think they actually expressed that they're pretty well treated, unlike maybe South Africa or some other destinations. They're pretty well treated. I think their issue had been about, visa processing for some had been a bit slow, a bit challenging. For others, they didn't report any problems, but that was generally the feedback. And Mr. President's response to them was that they should be good ambassadors for the country, that what we want is a situation where these countries will be looking for Nigerians. We want to change the paradigm from a situation where Nigerians feel fortunate to get into Dubai or fortunate to get into India or the US, and they're happy when they get there and they do everything they can to stay and all of that. We want to change the paradigm to a situation in which these countries are looking for Nigerians and feel privileged when Nigerians come to their country. That's the change in orientation we want. On the other issues, you raised the issue of companies. Yes, and Invest India. So we have an MOU that was a very important one, very strategic one. So in India right now, you have one of the largest digital infrastructure footprints in the entire world. They're competing now with the US and China. With respect to broadband penetration, with respect to local utilization of broadband technologies within the country, even amongst the poorest of the poor. People who didn't go to school are using smartphones in India. We have gone a long way in that direction. As Nigerians know, we have really penetrated even our local communities with smart technology. So we've done well, but there's a lot we still can do. So what we've done is we have this MOU between the Indian Ministry of Electronics, Innovation and Communications and our own Ministry of Communications, Innovation and Digital Technology. And basically the agreement is that they are going to share their entire blueprint with us in building out our own digital infrastructure footprint across Nigeria. They are going to not only train several of our people across our institutions within that subsector, NCC, NASENI, and some others, but also ensure that they get their companies in operation in Nigeria, in as much as we are going to be sending our own Nigerian technology. Again, remember, we have fintechs that are now operating in the U.S., that are raising billions of dollars around the world. We have companies that these other countries want. So what we are saying is, within these agreements, is we're also taking two questions of yours in one. We are actually actively sending our local indigenous companies and their trademarks to operate in these other countries. So that's a major part of the MOUs that have been signed. The other question you asked me about the business people, our own business people, and the level of cooperation. So we were able to announce investments from a government perspective. We were able to say, yes, these are the ones coming into our country. But when you start talking about the activities and operations of private companies, you can just imagine, as a business operator yourself, that they're very sensitive and very selective about what they say and what they don't say with respect to how far along they are in a negotiation with a colleague business in a counterpart country.
But where did you have indications as
to
that?
Yes, yeah, no, yes, absolutely. So for example, I believe UBA was able to make some progress with respect to expansion. We had several other companies that are lesser known than UBA in the technology sector and in agriculture that were able to make similar headway. But until those deals are done, you're never going to hear about it. In government, it's a little bit different. We can make those announcements a little bit ahead of time because we're actively involved.
Final question. I can't let you go without asking this.
Yes.
The UAE visa ban lifting. What actually is the true position? Because many Nigerians are really
antsy.
Yes, they don't understand. I personally, I had to, since that announcement, let me tell you what I've done, Ajuri. I've tried to book flights as if I'm going to Dubai. And nothing has showed up. As at even yesterday.
Yeah,
so what exactly is the true position? Because there is, the UAE authorities have not said anything about it. But there's also another thing. When they gave us the ban with 19 other African countries, they did not officially tell us. But it was a report. It was a report. But now that the federal government is so optimistic, why are we not seeing that level of optimism
No. That's
from the UAE?
Perfectly.
Why have we not? Agencies, in fact, a travel agent sent me a video. Now, I can go to Dubai now, and all of that. So please clarify what exactly is happening and what are the negotiations, what are the conversations ongoing now?
Yeah, so there has been a level of anxiety around this, and we understand why. Nigerians love to go to Dubai, not just for recreation, but also for business, for education, for healthcare, and so many things. So we understand the concern on the part of our people. Which is why we were very consistent in our messaging from the first statement to the follow-up till right now, that the agreement that was struck was at the highest level of authority. This is between the UAE president and the president of Nigeria. So they're in a room, they agree on something, right? Now, after you agree, I think anyone who understands basic bilateral relations I'm definitely not talking about you, but I'm talking of the audience, that there's a process, right? You would not have a situation where something is announced oratorically and then by magic is just done. The cabinet officials from both sides have to sit at the table and they have to agree that, on the basis of this, you will now sign, I will now sign.
So did the president of UAE pronounce, when Mr. President asked him that,
pronounced that.
Did he say it authoritatively?
We wouldn't have reported.
Because I know you were in the room.
We would not have reported it if he had not said so. I cannot issue a statement that the president does not reflect the reality of a presidential conversation. But the issue was about there's proclamation, then there's process. So where we are now is there's agreement, but then you have to go through the process to actualize and formalize the agreement to now manifest. So where we are now is, let me be very clear about this. So what are the issues on the table? If we're talking visa ban, the issues are, we have agreed that we will normalize. But what we are saying is that as we normalize, what we need you to do, Nigeria, is we want you to carry out your due diligence on those applications are those who are trying to apply in such a way that we, as much as possible, we minimize the bad eggs and we maximize those who are doing productive, fruitful ventures, whether it's just a vacation or whether it's business or what have you in the UAE. So these are the give and take that the give and take conversations that are being held.
How about on the FX repatriation? Because
Yes.
there is the millions of dollars still stuck.
Right.
UAE, Emirates, Etihad. There's also the issue of reciprocity. I know that could be go for the aviation minister and all of that.
Yeah.
But
He
are
even
there
addressed that yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there conversations ongoing right now as to regarding reciprocity? Because if you're saying let's have Emirates come, how are we having Nigerian airlines also going into Dubai or the UAE?
So reciprocity is absolutely on the table. But what we've said is that, when you get to a house, the first thing you want to do is enter the house before you start assessing the furniture, right?
Before you start making requests, I want to eat or drink water.
Exactly. You don't ask for water when you've not entered the house. So these are the conversations. But what I can say is that the issue of reciprocity is very much part of the discussion, and it's going to occur. But our focus now as well, the first thing is let's get this process normalized, let's get these documents signed, and then I think the last point I want to make is that in all the speculation, part of it has taken on a political dimension like everything does in our country, right? Where somebody will say, oh, the presidency is lying, or this one, that one. We just ask a very simple question. We issued a presidential statement. It wasn't done on a personal account, right? Why has the UAE not come out to debunk that? People should have just asked that basic question. Why have they not said this is false? The reason why is because they know that it's reflective of what happened. But what we are saying to our people is we should just allow the process to play out. We will get to the end of it, and visa processing will start. And when visa processing starts, everybody will know that we were sincere.
On that note, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, my dear sister. God bless you.
Thank you. I've been speaking with Ajuri Ngelale, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity.